Video games are the best, and they're always getting better. Times have certainly changed since the foggy days of my youth. Heck, even in only the last 10 years, games have improved significantly, with better graphics and visuals, polished up gameplay, and an overall more interactive experience than ever before. But what about the narrative, and what about the story? Back in the day, game developers didn't have the ability or the technology to create stunning graphics and detailed visuals for their games, and as such, they had to be more creative in other areas. The imagination of not only the developer, but the player too, were at play in many of the best earlier video games of our time. However, nowadays, the bar is raised higher than ever before, and more than ever, graphics are a top priority for developers and players alike. While this has led to some beautifully stunning games in recent years, with the promise of even better things to come, it seems that imagination and story have taken a bit of a back seat. Still important, but perhaps not as high of a priority for successful games now than they were years ago. Then comes Undertale. Admittedly, I wouldn't have even heard of Undertale if it hadn't been for friends praising this game like a fresh batch of cookies hot out of the oven. At a first glance, it doesn't look to be anything special. Very simple looking graphics taken right out of the 16-bit era were admittedly not a draw for me in the beginning. Now, while the visuals of a game are most certainly not the selling point for me, I can't help but appreciate the spectacular sunsets of Skyrim or the simple beauty of armies clashing in Civilization 5. However, with the raving encouragement of those who had played it before me and a reasonable $10 price tag, I decided to purchase this game for myself and see what all the hype was about. I am so glad I did. The story behind Undertale is that long ago, there was a war between humans and the monsters. The humans came out victorious and sealed the monsters underground, while the humans controlled the surface. Many years later, a young child, which ends up being you, stumbles into the underground. I really enjoyed the fact that a small amount of the backstory was given right off of the bat, keywords being small sample. The right amount of backstory of this new world was given to keep me in the loop, and it felt like I had some history to work off of, but only just enough that I was eager to learn more and see for myself. And Undertale did not disappoint. It's no secret that this game prides itself on its story elements. The game has a tale to tell, and Undertale most certainly delivered. As you make your way through the game, you learn more and more of why the monsters are trapped in the underground, how they're coping with it, and how they're trying to get out. But above all, who they are. Never have I ever seen such a cast of characters, not only in a video game, but in any form of entertainment. Take it from me, I have difficulty remembering the names of characters in almost everything I read, or in every game I play. Only a few characters per piece ever seem to stand out to me. Heck, I'd probably forget my own name if I didn't write it down every day. In Undertale, the characters were so unique, so interesting, and so memorable that I had no difficulty recalling the names and personalities of nearly every character I came across. Each one had a story to tell, with each one having a different take on the world around them, and a quirky personality to boot. It was truly a treat to interact with the vast spectrum of characters that I came across in my adventure. The fact is, these characters are trapped in the underground, a very dark, dismal, and even dreary environment. Despite this, many of the characters seem to make the most of the situation, and stay positive and determined that one day they will see the sunlight. It's almost inspirational in a way. The story around Undertale is actually very dark indeed. Now, years after the Great War, the monsters want to return to the surface, and are told that they need the souls of humans to break the barrier, sealing them in. By the time you show up, they only need one more, and you seem right for the picking. But I would often forget that while playing, wrapped up in the wacky shenanigans of these unique characters, only to on occasion be subtly reminded of the dark reality around me, which really hit home for me at the best of moments, shaking me out of my false sense of security. This was done so well at times, and it really made me stop and think about the characters and their situation. The story writing was absolutely flawless, conveying such powerful emotions in contrast at the best of times. Another thing that really wowed me was the amount of choice this game lets you have. It seems like every decision you make will have an outcome later on in the game. Even small choices have an effect down the road, and sometimes you may not even realize these until a second playthrough. This was a welcome surprise and certainly a change of pace to otherwise linear gameplay that we're oh so used to seeing nowadays. When it comes to the gameplay, I was actually quite impressed. Every so often you would come across an enemy, almost like poking around in the long grass in Pokemon. In the battle sequence, you would be given 4 options: fight, act, item, and mercy. Fight is as it describes. You get a chance to lay your best attack on your enemy. Act, however, is where the gameplay truly shines. Each enemy you face is unique, and they have their own special way of being defeated without actually harming them. Because it's different for each one, it requires you to find out for yourself how each enemy will behave. If you act in the correct way, then you will have the option to show mercy, and the fight is over. Every time you attack or act, you will be in control of a red heart, and must avoid all of the white blobs, shapes, figures, you name it, just like Aunt Sally's Brussels sprout recipe, using the arrow keys. Touch any of them and you'll lose health, lose too much health, and you'll go back to your last save point. Honestly, I really enjoyed the battle scenes. While it was essentially the same gameplay mechanics over and over, it was constantly kept refreshing and interesting, with each new enemy providing a new challenge. This was the part of the game that seemed to break the concept of this being an old-fashioned game the most. Oftentimes, each new enemy would present clever attacks, of which you would have to avoid if you wanted to stick around. While they may be difficult at first, it's not long before you understand the patterns of the attacks and find yourself mastering these enemies. However, coming across the same enemy more than a couple of times did start to become tiring. In all fairness, this really didn't happen too often, and for me it was mostly a result of not being exceptional at solving puzzles or following basic directions, although it made me much more hesitant to explore new areas, especially if I was at risk of a monster attack. But when I did explore the world around me, it was an absolute delight. It felt like there were no filler areas in Undertale, a truly complete game. At every twist and turn, there was something unique and special, whether that was a new character to meet, an enemy to vanquish or befriend, or even petting the occasional dog. Something was waiting to be discovered around every single corner, and Undertale made sure that exploring new areas was more than worth your while. However, as I mentioned earlier, some of this exploration was stifled just a bit by the constant approach of monsters. While only some areas actually had frequent monster attacks, I tended to avoid them like the plague. And looking at the puzzles, while there were a few puzzles here and there, Undertale probably could have benefited by having a few more. While some of the puzzles were interesting, there were a few too many that just seemed a bit simple and were solvable by basic trial and error, especially considering the level of detail and care placed in almost every other facet of the game. It seemed like this part was somewhat behind that pace. Now that's not to say, of course, that I wished for real brain teasers and long nights of staring at newspaper clippings like a disgruntled maverick detective tracking down a mysterious criminal, but puzzles with slightly more of a challenge would have been welcome. Surprisingly enough, one of the best parts of this game was the soundtrack. My toes were most certainly tapping throughout the entirety of this game, and some bosses even had specific soundtracks, which seriously made me forget about the battle and just sit back and listen. Sound and music are sometimes overlooked aspects of video games, but Undertale hit a high note in the music department. My only major complaint about this game was, oddly enough, the final boss. I ended up progressing through the game just fine until I hit him, at which point I seemed to have utterly no chance of defeating him. While Undertale had a challenging but fair learning curve throughout the game, it seemed like this final foe was far too powerful for me to even stand a chance. Now, granted, I'm certain if you had a strategy going through the game, collecting certain foods and items, then this last fight would have been a piece of cake. However, up until this point, I was able to work my way through the game just fine, with the occasional stops at the shops to stock up on HP giving goodies. So while it didn't take away too much from the overall experience, it was somewhat frustrating that I simply could not get past this final boss. All in all, Undertale was an absolute blast, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing it. It felt like you were in control of your destiny, and there were so many choices left up to you, the player. The story was well thought out, the characters were quirky and memorable, and arguably some of the best I've seen in a long time, and the jokes throughout would have made a comedy club feel like an awkward Thanksgiving dinner. After all, there's a reason why this game has generated a massive fan base in a matter of months. The fact is though, it's hard for me to do justice for this game. Undertale is something you have to experience for yourself, and with a modest $10 entrance price, there really is no reason why you shouldn't be giving this gem a try. But now I want to hear from you. Have you played Undertale? If so, what did you think of it? Was it good, bad, the best thing ever? Then let me know in the comment section below. I love hearing what you guys have to say. But anyways, that looks to be about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this review and you want to see more, then let me know in the comment section below and by hitting that like button. As well, don't forget to subscribe for more content by me. It's completely free and it only takes a click. With that, once again, I hope you enjoyed. That was Undertale. This is Tyandaga signing out.